So Uwazi means openness in Swahili. It is a database management tool that's been developed by HURIDOCS for human rights defenders who need generally to manage collections of information. And particularly for actors documenting violations, Uwazi has a number of features that we hope make your documentation efforts easier and more efficient. So we'd like to take you through this demo to show you how. So with Uwazi, your organization's database is referred to as an instance. And HURIDOCS generates instances for any human rights defenders, any human rights organizations interested in using and trying out Uwazi free of charge. So you can request if you're interested an Uwazi instance with us, and we'll be happy to share one with you. Once you receive your instance, you can get started right away with uploading your data to form your collection. As you can see here, this would constitute a collection of data in Uwazi. So Uwazi does make it easy to enter and store information in different formats. These formats can include PDF files, Word text files, documents, photos, videos, audio clips, and any other material that is relevant to your work. One of the main features of the tool is the ability to process and search through large volumes of text within PDF documents. What that allows you to do is that you can add highlights for references within your PDF document that you can refer to later, that you can search through as well. You can also add tags and anything else that is relevant to your workflow within your PDF document. Sometimes, though, we understand that human rights defenders have documents that they scan, for example, that are not machine readable, meaning that you cannot search through the text. This has been a challenge that's been raised by many of our partners. So we recently worked to launch the feature called OCR, which stands for Optical Character Recognition. And what this does is that it helps convert text from scanned documents or images, for that matter, into machine readable form, so that you can not only search through that text, but you can also add the references and the tags that you would any regular PDF document. And this OCR feature is available and can be used on materials in different languages, including the right to left languages such as Arabic. Now we know that information management for human rights defenders goes beyond the ability to just upload PDF files and images. Sometimes you actually are collecting information that you need to structure in a way that makes sense for your goals. And so what you would do in Uwazi is that you would create a data structure to help house that information and structure it in a way that helps you generate analysis and tell the bigger story. And so for human rights defenders, you might have a situation where, for example, you're collecting information related to an incident that took place. And this incident could have victims, for example, and perpetrators, and a record of the event itself. So in this way, you would have 3 large buckets of information relating to those victims, to those perpetrators, and to the event itself. And you would structure your database in this way. So let's see that in action in Uwazi. So in this case, those buckets of information that I referred to are called templates. And so as you can see here, I have started a template that I've called a record of incident. In this record of incident, I am free to change the title, and I can add the properties as they become relevant to my template. And so let's say in this record of incident, I want to capture, for example, the location that the event took place in. I want to capture the date. I can add these properties in my template so that when I save, I'm able to add those records in this particular template. So let's see that. Here you can see the list of the properties that you could use to build your template. So here's a date that I can drag and drop, geolocation, and a rich text field. A rich text field allows me to write in large text but I can change the title so it's more descriptive. So I can call this description of the event, for example. And I can add as many properties as I'd like to my template. And once I click on save, I have my template built. And I can do this for my other buckets of information. So I can do this template, build a template for victim with the relevant properties. So for victim, potentially I would have age, name, gender, or any other information that's relevant. Same with perpetrator. You might need to specify when you're building your template lists of terms as they become available to help have consistency across your terms and as your staff is entering, for example, information about your specific templates. So in Uwazi, you can build these terms and they're called thesauri. You can build a list that you can then tie to your template for later use. And it should be noted that you can edit these terms at any time. You can update them, change them, etc. And as you can see in this example here, these terms are built entirely from scratch. And so you can add these as needed. The helpful thing about having terms is that later on, when you're searching through your database, you can filter through these terms. You can also generate statistics according to for example, ethnic groups. If you have a list of terms such as these, you can filter by ethnic group and see how many of each you have. So if you're thinking ahead already about your analysis, it is helpful to build these terms ahead of time. Once you've created your template and you've created your list of terms, you've associated your template and your terms, you can now start adding information into your collection and to continue to add content as it becomes relevant and available. And in Uwazi, as you can see here, each piece of information, each piece of record that you add to your template, irrelevant of the template, is called an entity. Can have multiple entities per template, right? So within my template of victim, I can have multiple entities. Here, for example, I have an entity called Silva et al. Arrest. I have another attack here. This wouldn't be the victim template, but this is rather my record of incident template. And as you can see on the side, the properties that I built earlier in the record of incident, including geolocation, including date of the event and description, are here to hold the information that I have. And depending on the way in which I would like to consume the information that I have in my database, I can display it in different formats. I can have it in table view, where it's more of a table format, or I can have it in card view, which is what you see here in the middle. It gives you an overview of what is in that entity. And I can also have a map view. And with the map, I can zoom in a bit closer to disaggregate these points so that I can see much more closely what is the information in each map. And I can click on each point to get the information or the entity relating to that point. And within card view as well, I'm free to determine which of my properties appear in all of my cards. So that you can set in the settings. An important part of the work of human rights documenters is the ability to tell the bigger story, to make links between the various pieces of data that exist in your database. So once you enter multiple entities, multiple records in your collection under your different templates, you can create relationships between those records, right? So let's say in this example, you have your record of incident relating to the death of James Miller. You have information about the victims and you have information about the perpetrators. You can display it in this format to create the link between the three records that exist in the database, since they have that connection. And you can create multiple victims under the same record, for example, or multiple perpetrators if relevant. And you can build these sorts of relationship at multiple levels. So now that you've organized your content in Uwazi and you've created your relationships and you have your thesaurus list, etc., you can explore your collection and glean your insights from it in a few different ways. Let's see an example of how this can be done. So here's an Uwazi instance that has multiple records already entered in. Sorry about that. Maybe go back. There we go. I can use the filter to search through my information. So in this case here, I have about 20,000 victims, as you can see, entered in this instance. And when I filter by victim, the relevant other properties are adjusted. And I can filter further down by specifying the type of victim, for example. And these are all lists that I built earlier as I was creating my template. As you can see, I can filter further down. And as I keep filtering, you can see that the numbers on the side are adjusted to the relevant filter. As you can see, we're now down from 20,000 victims. We're now down to 9 who match all of my filter criteria. Right, so you can see we've gone down to 2 that match all of the criteria of the filters that I've searched through. You can also use the search bar to search for a particular keyword that you might have in mind. And once you have records, enough records in your database, you can visualize selected data in a chart or on a map. Let's also see that in action. So in that same database that we just looked at, you can see that here, for example, I have a chart that helps me visualize the number of victims that I have in my database by year. And as you can see, the graph is dynamic. So when I click on it, I can get more information. I can also see this, my template where I built, where I added a geolocation of relating to where a victim was last seen, for example, before they disappeared. I can display that in this way on a map to show, and I can zoom in and out to aggregate or disaggregate the data points and click on the data points to get information about those victims. And with that, we're very proud to mention that Uwazi can be localized into more than 180 different languages. That means both in terms of the user interface and the content of the database itself. So if your information collection is multilingual or use any other language besides English, you can set up your database and your interface in that language. In this case, we can see it in action. You go to settings. As a user, as a logged in user, an admin user, I would go to settings and languages. And as you can see in this instance, English is the active language, but I can browse through the available languages in the instance to add to my instance. So in this case, let's say I wanted to add French, for example. I would click on add language, type in confirm. And now the language has been added. As you can see on top, I can switch between my English interfaces and my French interface in the same database. And so the translations are not automatically provided, so you would need to provide those translations. You can also work with HURIDOCS' team who maintains a list of translated terms that we can share with you in CSV format, for example, that you can import directly into your instance so that when you get started, at least your interface is is already translated, the user interface terms. A handy feature of this is what is shown in here. There's a live translation button, which helps you basically quickly have an oversight over which terms are yet to be translated. And you can click on it and provide a live translation of that term. So in this case, from published to publié in French, when I click on submit and I switch to the French interface, I should see the word published here translated into French. Let's test it. There we go. And you can do that with any of the other terms that are underlined. So there's a live translation option there, which simply makes it easier to translate, but you can do all of your translations in the settings as well, if it's easier. I mentioned that we keep a list of translated terms at HURIDOCS that you can request to support your translation needs. And so far, we have lists in French, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, Thai, Burmese, and others that we continue to maintain. Now, if you're working as part of a team, and I think this is one of the questions that came up earlier, Uwazi has important features to support collaborative work. And so we have what we call access levels. As a user of Uwazi, you can create user accounts, and you can create as many user accounts as you need to support your work. And you can assign different roles and responsibilities to each user. So let's see that in action as well. So as a logged in user and admin user, I would go to users here, and I can see a series of users. And if I can add a user and assign a role here. And you can see we have 3 different roles: an admin, an editor, and a collaborator. So each user that you create, you'll be prompted to assign them a particular role. And this role will determine the permission and the access level that they have to the database, the instance. So let's go quickly look at the different permission levels, the differences between the 3. So if you're an admin user, you are the super user of the database. You have access to all of the functionalities of the database, including, most importantly, the settings, where you can build your data structure, as we saw earlier, by building templates, etc. You can also add users, you can create accounts, you can work on the translations, etc. So there is no limitation to what you access in the database. One step down from that is the editor. So the editor and the admin, their main difference is that the editor doesn't have access to the settings. So the editor has access to the database to create content, to upload information. So let's say you've created a template called victim. The editor can create any new records relating to victim, for example, but since they don't have access to the settings, they wouldn't be able to change the template called victim. So they don't have access to any of the settings, so they couldn't make any other changes where you would need to access the settings. But they can view entities, they can edit them, delete them, and create new ones. And then one level down from there, you have the collaborator. Now with collaborators, you have different options. You're able to add collaborators to view entities or to view and edit entities. And that level of permission, that granularity, you can set depending on your needs. Also with collaborators, what you can do is you can decide that you only want to share with them a subset of your data. Right? So let's say that you have a team of researchers, for example, with whom you'd like to share just one particular part of your database, the records that you've entered. You can select those entities and share them in bulk with users that you add as a group or as individuals as collaborators. And you can also determine whether those entities that you've shared with them, that subset of data, whether they can view them or they can view and provide edits as well. So that's what is being shown here. And you can create as many users as you would need and assign, like I said, the different permission levels. Also, if you would like to receive information from the public, for example, in this case, you have students from around the world who are collecting evidence of human rights violations that happen on university campuses, for example. You would like them to submit that information to you and your team for analysis. You can do so by creating a template, for example, that you would call here in this case, report an incident or a public submission form. And you can add a link to it on your database. And what this does is that it allows any member of the public to enter information, submit information without necessarily needing to log in and access your data that is private. If there is part of your database that you shared publicly, meaning that there is parts of your records that you published, then they can see those. Just like any other person, any member of the public could, but to be able to submit through the public submission form, they don't need to log in, and so they would use, as we can see in here, they would use the button, for example, in this case, and you would have built in this case a submission form template where you add these properties, as you can see, description of event, etc., whatever it is that you want to collect as information. And this is what they would use to enter in the information. They can attach files as well and enter a CAPTCHA for security reasons and click submit. Once they do that, it is submitted into your Uwazi instance, and you can access it to review, to edit, to publish if you would like, to keep private, etc. That's one way of receiving collected information from the public. Okay. Another question also that came up in the chat about security. So Uwazi takes into account the very serious security needs of human rights documenters. So the tool has various features to help keep your collected information safe and secure. So admin users, as they're adding users, can request, and users themselves within their accounts can add two-factor authentication, as you can see here. If you're logging in and you've enabled two-factor authentication on your user account, you would need to have an additional step where you enter an authentication code that is sent to your phone as an extra step of security to make sure that any unintended user does not have access to the database. So that's what we see here. It says two-step verification token required. And once you enter it, following your username and password, only then can you access the database. Also, in terms of security, there is an activity log with each Uwazi instance that allows the admin users to keep track of the changes that have been made to the database, to also see which user made what change at which time. This helps to keep track of any changes that have been made, and also if there is an issue, backtrack and see what exactly happened and when. And so this is an additional security layer that we've added for admin users to monitor the changes made to the data. And in addition to securely hosting and maintaining Uwazi, HURIDOCS also regularly undergoes third-party security audits of the tool to make sure that we catch and, most importantly, fix any potential vulnerabilities. Okay, so now that you have a better understanding of what Uwazi can do, let's take a look at Tella. Tele is an open source mobile application that you can have directly on your phone. It's developed by Horizontal, and it's currently only available for Android phones. Tele functions as an app on your phone, which allows you to write text, take pictures, videos, audio recordings, and any other information that's relevant to help document a certain event that's happening or that has already happened. So Tella is particularly useful to human rights defenders, especially actors that operate in dangerous settings, and we'll see why. I'd like to note that Tella's integration with Uwazi is not yet available, but Tella as an app is available for download now on Google Play Store. And I'll go into the difference between the app itself versus the integration with Uwazi. So if we're just looking at the app on its own, what can Tele do? Firstly, Tele can help you hide the app. With the app, you can hide it on your phone by using a different name and an icon. So if you're operating in settings where settings are not friendly to human rights defenders that are documenting events as they happen, you can hide the icon under something like a calculator, for example, and disguise it in that way. Also, any pictures, videos, and audio recordings that you collect using Tele are immediately encrypted. They're also inaccessible from the phone's gallery. So in that way, if you're documenting live and your phone gets confiscated, for example, the information that you just took is encrypted. And only a user's secret lock can open access to the encrypted information. And if you need so, Tele has a quick lock button that shuts down the application for quick action. It also hides it from your recently used apps in case you're in danger or like I said, you're worried about getting your phone confiscated. And if you're in an emergency situation where you need to quickly delete any sensitive data, you can do so as you've collected it. You can get rid of it so that it's not accessible to anyone else. And most recently, HURIDOCS has been working with Horizontal to integrate the Tele app with Uwazi. What this means is that now, in addition to being able to collect this information, you can submit it directly to your Uwazi instance to then do everything that we've seen so far, which includes tagging this information, classifying it, searching through it, et cetera, everything that you can do within an Uwazi instance. Right. So to connect your Tele app, once it becomes available, the integration, which soon should be available, you can connect your Tele. You will be able to connect your Tele app with your Uwazi instance by adding a new server in the Tele application, which you have on your phone. And once you do so, any of the templates that you've built in your Uwazi instance, you can download them with the click of a button to your Tele app. And you have them available to record any incident using that same structure that you have in your Uwazi instance. And Tele will use the same template terms that you have in your Uwazi instance, and you can fill in the information right from your phone. And in addition to text, you can also add images that you take or that you have in your phone's log. Geolocation, videos, documents, and any other files that are relevant. And once you complete your form, once you've recorded an incident, for example, you can submit it immediately and it will go into your Uwazi instance, or you could save it as a draft to come back to and maybe finalize the information that you were completing and then submit it later. The option to submit later is also an important feature, simply because sometimes we know that for human rights defenders, they operate in certain areas where there is really low or slow and unreliable internet connection. So in that way, your information is saved and you can submit it later on once you have access to better internet connection. So in that way, you can work offline and once you have access to internet, click submit for it to appear in your Uwazi instance. So we know that digital content is playing an increasingly important role in human rights investigation. And so we worked with Enrique Pirases of Carnegie Mellon University's Center for Human Rights to integrate his tool known as Digital Evidence Vault, or DEV. So DEV is a web browser extension that allows you to save and preserve copies of digital evidence. So with the integration with Uwazi, you can save those copies directly in your Uwazi instance now. And so the extension helps capture online media and metadata according to standards that might make it more admissible, the data that you have collected more admissible in court. And once connected to an Uwazi instance, the entities that are the integration with it allows you to have your entities populated by the DEV, including relevant metadata, such as the title of the video, or where or the file, the entity itself, the video itself captured as a video in Uwazi in your entity, the date that you saved the page, the original link, and any other relevant metadata could be captured and stored, so that if that information no longer exists on the place where you got it, for example, YouTube, at least you have a copy of it and the relevant metadata in your Uwazi instance.